بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون أما بعد. So inshallah we're continuing with our classes, our fiqh classes, and last week we were speaking about the madhahib and the four imams and how fiqh evolved from the time of the Prophet ﷺ to the time of the four imams, and how the madhahib came about and how they're followed still to this day, thousands of or hundreds of years later, and how the difference of opinion in fiqh came to be during the time of Sahaba, and then the scholars, the four imams. And Islam came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to mankind by way of messengers. And when the messengers are gone, as our time now, we don't have messengers or prophets, we refer back to scholars, to ulama. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this in the Quran, that when you don't know something about your deen, you have to return to the scholars. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask, Allah refers to them as أهل الذِّكْر, the people of remembrance. So this means that they are people who are connected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not just people who have knowledge or information they're just giving you. They're people with this information that are connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's academic and it's spiritual, ahlul dhikr. It's not just academic where someone is giving you answers, yes, no, halal, haram. That person has a connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because Allah refers to them as ahlul dhikr. Yes, it means they are knowledgeable. It also means they are people who remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not only when they are answering your question, they answer the question by giving you an ayah or a hadith, but when they are in their private lives, there are people who are connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the scholars throughout history, they have written books and left those books for us, and we benefit from those books every single day. And this is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for us to be able to benefit from works of scholars from hundreds of years ago. Many, many centuries ago, we can sit at home and read what they wrote about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what they wrote about the Quran, and so on. And there's many scholars in Islam. We mentioned the four imams, and after them there are many more scholars, and from them is the Imam and the Hafidh who wrote the book we are going to be learning, and he's known as Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, and he is from the 8th century. He was born in 773. So you see the difference when we mention the four imams. Imam Abu Hanifa was born 80 years after the Hijrah, so 70 years after the Prophet ﷺ died, which is very, very close. Imam Malik was born in around that time, 93. Imam Shafi'i, Imam Ahmad, all of them were born within 100 years of the Prophet's passing. Imam Ibn Hajar, he was born in the year 773. So that's a very big gap or big time from when the Prophet ﷺ died. His first name was Ahmad ibn Ali ibn Muhammad, ibn Ali, ibn Ahmad. You see, you see the variety they have in their names. They were always with the names that they know and the names that were names of prophets and Sahabi. His name was Ahmad ibn Ali ibn Muhammad, ibn Ali ibn Ahmad, ibn Hajar. So Hajar was a nickname of one of his grandfathers. And that was his nickname. His nickname was Hajar, one of his grandfathers. So this person, this scholar, he became known by the son of Hajar, because that grandfather named Hajar, he was famous or known amongst the people, so he was known as the son of Hajar, and the name stuck with him as Ibn Hajar. And Asqalan is a place in Palestine, but he was born in Egypt. He was born in Al-Qahira, but his asl is from Palestine, from Sham. And he memorized the Quran at a very young age. And most of this information is in the introduction in your book about the life of Ibn Hajar. If you read the introduction, you will see some of this information there. He memorized the Quran when he was 9 years old, and he had a very strong memory. He memorized the books of the scholars also when he was very young, and he became known as Al-Hafidh. If someone says Al-Hafidh said, you know right away they're talking about Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, because he had a very strong memory. He authored many books, and he was a scholar of Hadith, scholar of Tafsir, scholar of Fiqh, scholar of Arabic language. He learned all of this from his teachers at a very young age. He learned in Mecca and Medina. He learned in Dimashq, in Asham, and in Egypt. So he learned in many different places. He had a very strong memory. He memorized the books his teachers gave him at a very young age, and he read them back to his teachers. The book here is called Bulugh Al-Maram, but he has another book, which is probably his most famous work, Fath al-Bari, which is an explanation of Sahih al-Bukhari. Sahih al-Bukhari is probably the most famous hadith book, the most authentic book of hadith. And this scholar, Ibn Hajar, he wrote an explanation on it, and he explained every single hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari. And it took him, some say over 20 years, some say over 30 years to finish that explanation. It was like a lifelong project. And if you read Fath al-Bari, it's an amazing book. The explanation of Sahih Bukhari by Ibn Hajar. It's an amazing book, how he brings lessons of hadith, he brings lessons of fiqh, he brings lessons of aqidah, he brings lessons of the Arabic language. And you see how vast his knowledge was in that book. This book is a collection of ahadith. And he does not explain the ahadith, he just lists ahadith in chapters. So he calls it Bulugh Al-Maram, which the English translation is, you see it on your cover, attainment of the objective. Does anyone know what that means?
So objective means to all the way to Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. That's our objective, to follow him.
Okay. So this book is getting you there? So according to the author, this book will get you to your objective, or your goal, or your destination. And that is the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ about how to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, about fiqh. This is his opinion on what the book is. Obviously there's a lot more to fiqh than what's in this book. This book is only ahadith. There's no ayat in this book. So obviously there's a lot more to fiqh than this book. But his opinion is that this is a good foundation for you if you want to learn ahadith, not ayat, ahadith on the fiqh of ibadah, on the fiqh of worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he mentions in the introduction that this is a mukhtasar, this is a summary, it's a short version, because books of fiqh are a lot bigger than this. This has about 1,400, I think, or 1,600 ahadith, and that's to him considered a summary, a short version, because there's a lot more ahadith concerning these chapters, and chapters he does not talk about. And other books of the other scholars are much bigger. But this is a good foundation, a good start for you to learn these ahadith and learn what they mean and practice them. It will give you a good start for you to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon basira, upon sound knowledge. Because there's a difference between the person who worships Allah without knowing where this information came from or how he's doing it, without knowing how or where the way he's praying came from. And there's a difference between the person who knows that he's praying upon basira, upon the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where the Prophet ﷺ taught us to pray like this, and there's ahadith that back it up and ayat. So the Imam Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah, he starts the book with Kitab al-Tahara, okay, the book of purification. And each hadith he mentions, at the end of each hadith, he mentions where the hadith came from. What scholar of hadith collected that hadith. So at the end of each hadith, he will say something like أخرجه or متفق عليه, meaning from Bukhari and Muslim, or أخرجه السبعة, or أخرجه الستة. And by this he means different scholars have collected this hadith. So if he says أخرجه السبعة, this is all in the introduction of your book. He says this hadith has been collected by the seven. What does he mean by the seven? Ahmad and the other six. Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah, and Nasa'i. Okay? He mentions the six plus Ahmad, Imam Ahmad. So that hadith was collected by all the seven of those scholars. And so this is like a treasure of this book, that he himself mentioned where these hadith, where he got them from. Because remember, this is 700 years after the Prophet ﷺ passed away. So books have been written, the scholars have passed, scholars of hadith have written their books, so he's putting it together for you in this collection. So he, rahimahullah, he starts with Kitab al-Tahara. And al-Tahara means purification. And most books of fiqh start with Kitab al-Tahara. Why? Most books of fiqh that are organized by chapters start with the book of purification. How to purify yourself, wudu, and so on. Why do most of the, or all of these books start with the book of purification or tahara? Yes? It's what you need to do to start worshipping Allah. Okay, good start.
There's no prayer without tahara. You cannot pray salat, for example, until you mutahhir.
You can't pray until you make tahara.
Tahara is half of your deen.
Tahara is half of the deen.
There's a different opinion on the tahara when you do read a Quran. You know, there are different scholars says different thing about that. You don't have to be tahara, but most of the scholars says yes, you need to be tahara for reading a Quran, even touching the Quran.
Okay, so it's important to have tahara. Last one. It's a precondition to the acceptance of worship. Any sisters? Okay, so they start with tahara because salah is the most important amal you do. Salah is the most important amal you do. And tahara is one of the most important conditions or detailed conditions for salah. So salah is the most important thing you can do in your life in terms of deeds. And tahara, wudu, is one of the most important conditions of salah. So that's why they start with the tahara, because of salah, because of the prayer. So at-tahara, as we said, means purification. And inshallah, I'm going to give you a little demonstration here about the Arabic language and how the Arabic language works. Can I take it off?
It's long enough.
It's long enough?
Yeah.
So, as we said, the book starts with Kitab al-Tahara. And in the Arabic language, Arabic is driven by root words. So you have a root word, and then you have many other words that come from that root word. And Tahara so the word tahara is the actual noun, but all words come from a root word, which is a verb. So in this case, the root word is tahura. Ta, ha, ra. tahura. Okay, so this is known as the root word in Arabic. Most root words in Arabic are from 3 letters. Most words.
Can you also write in English on the side if you don't mind?
No, this is Arabic lesson. The English will come, inshallah. Don't worry about it. I'm just gonna make these darker. Musa, I need a different. Musa, can you get me a different marker, please? This one might work. Tahura. Okay. So most root words in English are from 3 letters. Okay, some of them have 4, very few have 5, and very few have 6. 6 is the most. But most words in Arabic come from a root word that has 3 letters. And tahara is from tahura. And many other words that have something to do with purification are a form of this word. So tahura is the verb, tahara is the noun. Tahara. Can you sisters see? So tahara is the noun. And you see the root letters are in here. The ta, the ha, and the ra. So it added an alif and added a ta marbuta. This is how the word changes to mean something else that still has something to do with purification. So this means to purify. Okay? This means purification. This is the verb, the past tense. This is the noun, tahara. The chapter says Kitab al-Tahara. Okay, and then he mentions a hadith. And other words that have something to do with tahara, you will see in the hadith that we are going to read. And the first hadith is huwa tahuru ma'uhu. When the Prophet ﷺ is speaking about the seawater, that it's pure, it's purifying, he says tahuru. And tahur is a form that comes from this root word. So tahur tahur. Okay, there's the root letters ta, ha, and ra. They added a waw was added. This means it is purifying. Okay, tahur. It is purifying and pure in itself. So it has something to do with the purity. Here it means it is purifying. Okay, and also you have the word tahir. 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 The root letters, ta, ha, and ra, and added an alif to it. And the scholars say the more letters you add, the more meaning that word has. So tahir means pure. Tahur is pure, but it's also purifying. Okay, another word is mutahhir. Mutahhir. Tahir. So this one starts with a meme. There's a meme in the beginning, and then you have the root letters ta, ha, and ra. Mutahhir means something that purifies something else, like water. Water is mutahhir. You can use water to purify yourself or purify other things. Also, mutahhar. 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 You see the difference here? I'll make it green so you... This here is a kasra, mutahhir. This is a fatha, mutahhar. This is ism fa'il, known in Arabic, ism fa'il, someone or something that is doing the act of purifying. And this is ism maf'ul, what the act is being done on. So mutahhar means something is purified. This is doing the purifying. This is something that is already purified. Mutahhir and mutahhar. Okay, so jazakallah khair. So you're going to find many examples of this. If you look at the Arabic in Hadith, in the Quran, you will see many, many examples of this. And I'm going to give you another example. I mentioned this one because that's the first word Anybody want to keep this for a few more seconds to write it? Halima? Okay. So I mentioned this word because it's the first word in the book, and I want to show you how the Arabic language works. A very small example, a very brief and quick example, that Arabic comes from root words, and the word changes, or other letters are added to it to change and enhance and give the meaning, or give it different meanings. I'm going to give you one more example. The word sajada sajada. We all know what sajada means, right?
Yep.
What does it mean? To prostrate. When you make salah, you put your forehead on the ground. That is sajada. This is the verb. This is the past tense. Muhammad sajada. Muhammad made sujood. So we have the root letters Sin, Jim, and Dal. Okay, Sin, Jim, and Dal. The present tense is yasjudu. Yasjudu. Which means the present tense, he is prostrating now, or he prostrates. Okay, the past and the present. You see, in the present, we added a ya, and most present tense verbs put a ya in front of the past tense, and then some of the harakat, the vowels, they change, and you get the present tense. So, sajada, yasjudu. To he prostrated, he prostrates, or he is prostrating. The word sajid, sajid, sajidun. The root letters are here, Sin, Jim, and Dal, and Alif was added in the middle. It means someone who prostrates. This is ism fa'il. Someone who prostrates. And for the feminine, we would add a ta marbuta, and it would be sajida. Sajida. So this is for female, the female who prostrates. So the root letters are there, and alif was added. And then you have a word like masjid. Masjidun. The root letters are here, Sin, Jim, and Dal. And again, like the other word, we added a meme here. Now this becomes something to do with sajda. This is the place where you do sajda. We all know what masjid is, this place we're in now. So you see the root letters are here, and this becomes the place where you do sajda. There's also other words like sijjada, like a rug, or the prayer rug, sijjada. So this is just a brief view or brief look into the Arabic language and how you're going to, or you should look for these things while you're reading a hadith or Quran, to see how the words evolve into a different form, but they are still related or connected to its original meaning of the root word. And we mentioned here Kitab al-Tahara. So that's the first book of, or the first part of this book is called Kitab al-Tahara, the book of Tahara. And the chapter of Miyah, or water. Kitab al-Tahara, Bab al-Miyah. Bab al-Miyah, Miyah is the plural form of ma'. Ma' is water, and the plural form is, you see in the top of the chapter 1, Miyah, Mim, Ya, Alif, Ha. And usually, ma' is always a singular verb. In English, it's called an uncountable noun. Water. No one, we don't say waters in English. Arabic is kind of the same way. It's usually only ma', but here it does have a plural form, which is miyat, and the scholars who explained this book and this chapter say that he brought it plural because he's talking about the different types of water. Not that water is plural, but the different types of water which you will see in the ahadith that are to come. So, who would like to read the first hadith for us in Arabic and in English? تفضل شيخ.
عن أبي هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم في البحر هو الطهور ماؤه والحل ميتته أخرجه أربعة وابن أبي شيبة واللفظ له وصححه ابن خزيمة والترمذي ورواه المالك والشافعي وأحمد. Narrated Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu that Rasulullah, Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said regarding the sea, its water is purifying and its dead animals are lawful to eat. Al-Arba'a and Ibn Abu Shayba reported it. Version is of the latter, Ibn Khuzaymah, and At-Tirmidhi graded it Sahih sound, and Malik al-Shafi'i and Ahmad reported it.
Okay, so the first hadith in the book is about water, and the hadith has two different parts to it. The first part is about water. The second part is about food from the sea. The hadith is narrated by Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, and Abu Hurairah, the great companion who narrated the greatest amount of a hadith from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whose name was Abu Hurairah. What was his name? Abu Hurairah, we mentioned this last week, was a kunya, like Abu Hanifa, a name that starts with Abu or so it's called a kunya, like Abu Hanifa, Abu Hurairah. It's not his real first name. His name is, who had their hand up? Yusuf? Abdurrahman ibn Sakhar al-Dawsi. So his name is Abdurrahman ibn Sakhar al-Dawsi. And Abu Hurairah, he narrated the greatest number of hadith from any other companion. Okay, he narrated over 5,000 ahadith alone. And some scholars have different numbers, but that's in general the general amount he narrated from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Over 5,000 ahadith, or some say 4,000. How many years or how much time do you think he had to spend with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam for him to narrate this many hadith?
5 years?
22 years?
5 years.
5 years? He was with the Prophet ﷺ for 2 years. 2 years. Okay? And he narrated the greatest number of a hadith. Now, he narrated the highest number of a hadith. Abu Bakr was with him for 23 years. Who do you think heard more from the Prophet ﷺ?
Abu Hurairah, because he was there 24 hours.
Listen carefully. Abu Bakr was with him for 23 years. Abu Hurairah was with him for 2 years. Who do you think heard more from the Prophet ﷺ? Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr. Abu Hurairah was with him for 2 years. How did Abu Hurairah narrate more hadith than Abu Bakr?
Because he was with Prophet 24/7.
Because he was with him for 24/7, his memory.
So some make dua for him.
2 years after the
Anyway,
decease of Rasul
Mhm.
and Abu Hurairah lived for like 100 years.
50, he died 59. Mhm.
Abdullah.
The brother said Abu Bakr, or the other brother said Abu Bakr was with him 24/7. So was Abu Hurairah for those 2 years. After the Prophet ﷺ died is when hadith started to be narrated to others. Because when he's alive, you go straight to him. Others heard from him and took it to others, but at the end of the day, everyone wants to come to the Prophet ﷺ and hear from him himself, and hear from his gathering, and be in that type of gathering. When the Prophet ﷺ died, Abu Bakr lived for 2 years after that, and he was the Khalifa of the Muslimin, and he was occupied with the fitna that was going on with those who were rejecting the zakat, didn't want to pay the zakah, and other things governing the Muslim ummah. And he was only alive for 2 years after the Prophet ﷺ died. So he wasn't, people didn't come to him for those things. They would go to the other Sahabi. And Abu Huraira, he lived for 59 years or 49 years after the Prophet ﷺ died. So he was able to relate more to others than Abu Bakr. But Abu Bakr heard much more than Abu Huraira. Okay? But a lot of those people during his time would just go straight to the Prophet ﷺ and take from him. But after he died, Abu Huraira, he spread more than Abu Bakr, who only lived for 2 years after the Prophet ﷺ died. So Abu Huraira, he narrated the most number of ahadith. Other companions that narrated a large number of ahadith are Aisha, his wife,
Abdullah ibn Umar,
Abdullah ibn Umar, what's that? Anas ibn Malik, Abdullah ibn Abbas, Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, Jabir ibn Abdullah. These are other companions that narrated a large number of ahadith, but the gap between Abu Huraira and number 2 is like really, really big. So Abu Huraira, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed him, first of all, with being with the Prophet ﷺ for that amount of time, and learning from him, and memorizing from him, and transmitting what he heard. So Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, he said, the Prophet ﷺ said, Fil Bahr, this is a summarized version of the hadith. The complete hadith is that some people came to the Prophet ﷺ and told him, Ya Rasulullah, when we are on the water, we take a little bit of when we are on the sea, we take some water, a little bit of water with us. If we use it to make wudu, we get thirsty, meaning there's only a little bit left. Can we make wudu with the sea water? And they ask this because the sea water is different from the water that they normally get, the rainwater or the rivers, because it's salty. So they noticed the difference. So they asked about it. So they said, when we're on the sea, we have some water with us, and we use it to make wudu, but then we get thirsty. We don't have much left. Can we make wudu with the sea water? And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, هُوَ الطَّهُورُ مَاؤُهُ الْحِلُّ مَيْتَتُهُ. He didn't say yes, and he didn't say no. He gave an answer that encompasses yes and no, and much more. And this is from the Jawami' al-Kalim, that he speaks little, but the meaning is, you can write volumes about it. So he said, هُوَ الطَّهُورُ مَاؤُهُ. The sea water is purifying. The water of the sea is purifying. And he said, الْحِلُّ مَيْتَتُهُ. And the dead animals from the sea are halal to eat. So the seawater, number one, can be used, number one, it's pure in itself. When something is tahur, is purifying, before it purifies, it's pure in itself. It's pure by itself. And then you can use it to purify something else. So this is the meaning of the word tahur that we had on there. Ta fatha. Tahur means it's pure, and you can use it to clean yourself, or clean your belongings, or clean your home, clean your utensils, clean your clothes, to clean other things. So it's tahur. It purifies other than it. So you can use it to make wudu, even though he didn't say yes. The answer is, it's purifying, meaning yes, you can use it to make wudu, and you can use it to purify yourself in any other way you need to purify yourself in. And this is one of the forms of purifying water, the water from the sea. Another type of purifying water is rainwater. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَنزَلْنَا مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً طَهُورًا. The same word, ta, fatha, tahur, means it's pure and it purifies. That's why I wanted to show you the Arabic, because you see in the hadith and the ayat how they come, and the different harakat you put on it will have a different meaning. Okay, طهور وأنزلنا من السماء ماء طهورا لا يمسه إلا المطهرون, those who are purified. Okay, so the seawater is purifying, the rainwater is purifying, rivers, springs, any type of natural water that remains on its natural state is tahir and mutahhir, and it purifies other than it, so you can use it to purify. Another type of purifying water is zamzam. The Prophet ﷺ, he made wudu with zamzam once, which shows, of course, it's pure and it can be used to purify yourself and purify others. So he answered this question with an answer that is very encompassing, that you can take a lot of rulings out of it, and he gave him extra information for something he did not even ask about. He said, وَالْحِلُّ مَيْتَتُهُ. Okay, he's speaking about the sea, that it is the dead animals from the sea are halal to eat if they are found dead. Now, why did he mention this? Because he thinks the companion who is asking, if he doesn't know whether the water can be used for wudu, then he might not know, or of course he doesn't know about the fish that live in the water, if it's halal or not to eat. So he gave him an extra information that the dead sea creatures, anything from the sea, is halal to eat, whether you kill it or you find it dead. Okay? Different from land animals. Land animals that are halal to eat, they are only halal if you slaughter them in the Islamic way. If you find a dead sheep, you don't know how it died, or you saw it die by some blunt force hit, or it got cut somehow, it got impaled by something and it died from that injury, or it fell from a high place and it injured itself and it died, that animal is haram to eat, even if it's an animal that is halal to eat, like a sheep or a cow or a chicken or whatever it may be. If it dies from a way that is not slaughtered, it dies from another way by an injury, or a way that you don't know how it died, then it is not permissible to eat the meat of that animal. The sea creatures are different. Fish, anything. This hadith is general, that everything in the sea is halal to eat, even if it's dead. Some scholars, they make exception for some animals, but you really have to prove that this type of animal actually lives in the sea or doesn't live in the sea. For example, they say like alligators and crocodiles. Sometimes they're in the sea, sometimes they're out of the sea. If you can establish and confirm that they are from the sea, then they are halal to eat, because the hadith is general. It does not make any exceptions. Turtles, they're in the sea, they're out of the sea, in and out. So the scholars say you have to really define where this animal lives most of its life, in the sea or out of the sea. If most of it is in the sea, then it's a sea creature. It can be eaten with slaughtering or without. So that's the general rule. We're not going to go too much into it because that's all this hadith says here. So after the text of the hadith, Imam Ibn Hajar, he says, أخرجه الأربعة, which is the four Imams of hadith after Bukhari and Muslim, Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, Nasa'i, and Ibn Majah. Those four collected this hadith along with Ibn Abi Shayba. Ibn Abi Shayba was the teacher of Imam al-Bukhari. He was the Shaykh of Imam al-Bukhari. وَاللَّفْظُ لَهُ. So this wording is from the hadith that Ibn Abi Shayba collected, not the wording of Abu Dawud or Tirmidhi or Nasa'i and Ibn Majah, where he says the wording is from the latter. That means the wording is from the hadith of Ibn Abi Shayba. So each one of these scholars might have a different wording of the hadith, but in general it's the same. There might be an extra waw or a different fatha, kasra, dhamma or something like that. So this wording is from Ibn Abi Shayba. واللفظ له وصححه ابن خزيمة والترمذي ورواه مالك والشافعي وأحمد. So you see all these scholars that narrated this hadith, and from them are some of the Imams, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi'i, and Imam Ahmad, rahimahumullah jami'an. So that's the first hadith in this chapter, and inshallah we're just going to take that hadith for today. And so you can see how the author, he brings the chapter, and then he starts with something general. The rulings are very general, and then he starts to get into specifics in terms of water and purities and impurities, and you will see that in the coming ahadith, inshallah. Any questions?
Yes.
Yes.
The water has to be running water, it should be like still somewhere, like it's standing.
It doesn't have to be running, no. For it to be purifying.
Sometimes it's dirty water in the pond or somewhere.
So that's the next hadith will deal with those things. But in general, it doesn't have to be running. It doesn't have to be running. Any other questions?